Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're welcoming back Nigel Matthews, CEO of GamesQuest and now partner in a new adventure, Mystery and Adventure Games. Nigel, welcome back to the binge. How you doing, sir?
Awesome. Thank you very much. What a wicked introduction. But hi. I hope you're all well.
A man of your stature only gets the best intro.
When's that happening?
Yeah, exactly. So for those who don't know you, I usually look this up before I think episode 8 and 37 or something like that, where we talked distribution and shipping and all that fun stuff that's exciting. And I know everybody really gets to, just gets the juices flowing getting into shipping. But today we're actually going to talk about something completely different. You've entered into a partnership with two other people, I believe, and you've started this new kind of murder mystery thing. So I want to kind of get into this, what this is all about, how you even started this process. Why don't we start there? Where did this come about? Where did this idea generate from? What was the genesis?
So once upon a time when I was young, so my partners are very, very old friends. One's Neil and the other one's Richard. And the startup, I used to be in a hobby when before the internet, there was something called Play by Mail games. And Play by Mail games is we used to play our games by the post. And I launched a company, bizarrely, called Mystery and Adventure Games back then, and Neil was another company, and so we became friends through that way. We were kind of I wouldn't say big in that industry, but we were kind of very prominent, shall we say.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we kind of got to know each other, and then we ended up running a convention together in good old Birmingham, where we play board games and role playing stuff. And what about the second time where we both came up with this idea to run a murder mystery game? Because we sat at different conventions, we'd seen things like the Vampire Masquerade and what was intended as free format role playing games that were kind of going on there. So we wrote a murder mystery game where for about 25 people, for the people at the convention, and it went down incredibly well. So every year we would run a fresh new, and then we would go around all the other different games conventions, which is where I met Richard, who was a friend of Neil's, who I think he won the British the British Open D&D competition for best role play, and I kind of met him, and then he started writing these murder mysteries. And so it kind of went from there, really. And to explain what a murder mystery game is, it's a lot of people will think Blood on a Clock Tower and other similar. Blood on a Clock Tower is a far superior game to your typical murder mystery games, but ultimately it's scripted. Ultimately, you are scripted to you have a character and it's scripted, and everybody has a role to play, and then you have to work out eventually at the end of the night who the murderer was, and they're fun and they're really cool, but it gets a bit kind of boring. Well, we took the idea from something like Vampire Masquerade, and then from that side of it, kind of put them two together, really, and developed this, what we call a free format role-playing game, which is centered around a murder mystery. So, but the difference between us and a typical murder mystery is once the game starts, anything can happen. Anything. The result of the evening, it all depends on the player interaction, how the player's done. There is no set script. You have a background, you have objectives to achieve, some of which will have nothing to do with the murder whatsoever. And those objectives could be to find a murderer, or there might be something that you need to achieve during the evening, and you can only do that through talking and communicating and role playing, and within that your objectives is also to potentially role play certain aspects of your character that can come out. It might be walking with a limp or talking with an Irish accent or something silly and frivolous and stuff, which breaks it down. And then during the evening you could end up murdering other people, or you could in fact end up being murdered at some point. And so this whole thing could develop, and we used to run it for about 20 odd players, but we knew we could play it from as little as 12 players and right the way through. So we wrote a lot of those, and in fact, at one point, we even set a company up called Near Death Experience. So we
Oh,
started
that's
to run
cool.
corporate events. Yeah, but this was years ago, and of course, eventually that kind of died away, and we moved on to other things.
Why did that
And
die? So I want to jump into that because I didn't know any of this about you. Like I've known you now for a few
no,
years because we use you obviously for Tin
oh,
Robot Games and distribution
yeah,
of our games on Kickstarter. Uh, but I didn't know any of this background at all. So
oh, I know, right?
where did that like? So did ShipQuest? Does that just kind of take over and you just kind of jettisoned all this other stuff you're
No,
working
no,
on, or how
ShipQuest.
these things
Well,
kind of?
so just for the record, it's GamesQuest, and ShipQuest is one of the services
My
that we
bad.
offer.
Okay, I
It's our
apologize.
software. No, it's fine. It's fine. We've gone through a few transitions, but so no. GamesQuest came. I was always board gamer back then and a role player
Yeah.
before that, and I got into selling corporate computer software for many years. And it was only through a hobby of buying and selling secondhand board games, which is what my passion is. My passion is always about gamers,
Hmm.
and gaming. That's always been my passion. So right from an early age where I was doing, role playing and then through play by mail, which became a huge passion, I used to run my own role playing game, through the mail, and then other things
So what
kind of
happened
grown
to
from
that
there.
though? Like what happened to this play by mail? Because obviously you had
Sure.
something that was going there for a while.
Yeah.
Did you eventually just shut it down and said, you know what, I don't have time to work on this, or
Yeah.
did the market kind of peter off, or
Oh, a bit of both. The problem is that you used to charge, like I charge maybe £2 or £3 to do a turn,
mm,
and it's hand moderated, and you just couldn't make enough.
yeah,
You couldn't do enough turns in a week, and you couldn't charge enough
yeah,
in order to make any sort of living from a hand moderated game. It was too consigned, and then so you then had to move into computer moderated games, where it would do stuff. And I actually developed a football game, a play by mail football game, which was computer moderated, but your customer retention was really difficult because people would only have a finite money to spend every 2 weeks or on their turns. And then obviously the internet arrived, and now still play by mail is still going, but on a much smaller scale. You can play by email and that sort
mm,
of stuff as well.
yeah,
But no, so there wasn't enough money into it, and I needed to make money, and then ended up getting into a proper sales job, really. And that's where I kind of left my gaming period behind, when I actually got to go and make some proper money. We're still board gaming and that
sure,
sort of stuff, doing that one. And then they brought out Civilization, and my life was ruined on the PC. I got hooked on things like Civilization and stuff, as
yeah,
we all do. So because we're gamers,
yeah,
we play games, and that's what we do. So and it was only really, that I when I got back into, by accident, really buying and selling secondhand board games, and then setting up an eBay site, and then eventually an Amazon site, and then it metamorphosized eventually into where we're at today.
yeah.
So, but yeah.
And then when did you have the conversation with your colleagues to say, okay, let's resurrect this thing? That there was still something here, and I think this can
Yeah,
now's the
I've
time,
always
right?
kind of hankered over it, and we have a weekend away, as
Mm,
a group of friends, mostly company friends, and we call it Springboard because we always go away in the spring to a house for the weekend, like
yeah,
20, 30 of us, and we play board games and stuff. And I went, you know what? I haven't run a murder mystery for a very long time, and at the back of my mind, as I see, a lot of publishers we work with a lot of role playing publishers, and I'm thinking to myself, and there's nothing like it. I saw the success of Blood in a Clock Tower, but even so, that's still a typical kind of scripted to a point. It is a lot better than others, a much more immersive experience, but it's still, the outcome is always going to be what it will be. So I've always had the back of my mind. I went, oh, I fancy running that again, which I did, and we ran it. It was brilliant. And then afterwards, I started, because I got back in touch with Neil and said, "Do you still have all of this on file?" And he dug it out. He said, "Yeah, I do." So we kind of run, was the Roman one, actually, because we have a Roman one that
oh,
we've
that's
been.
cool.
And then I went like, do you know what? I fancy if we could put this in a box where people can literally run their own event, and do it in such a way that everything's in the box, that whether it's 12 players or 13 or anything from 12 to 24 players, they could literally run this out of their own house. And it's honestly, when you experience it, when you go to our website, we were uploading pictures and images, and we ran one the other day, and it was just, I had people who were experienced role players and people who were complete novices, and like once they get going, they just love it. It's such an immersive experience. It's so much fun, that they get so much out of it that I just went like, you know what? I think there's a potential here, because there's a global market of something that's a little bit neat, a little bit unique, a little bit different, but really scratches a different itch to currently what's in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for someone that doesn't play murder mysteries, and I'm one of them. Not that I'm adverse to it, but I just never been in a situation where someone's had said pulled one out and said, "Hey, let's do this." I imagine these take place over an amount of time, right? So what's it for somebody who's uneducated in murder mystery like myself? How many hours would a game like this take?
Well, there's two things here. Which a typical murder mystery, a typical in the box murder mystery, which you get out and you all give your characters, and then over dinner you'll be reading stuff out, and and certain things have to happen. That can range for however you want it to last for, from like an hour and a half to 4 hours.
Okay.
Hours are structured in a way that it would last about 3 hours. Okay. You could eke it out a bit longer should you wish to, but typically we recommend 3 hours. And that's, we tend to, within the rules, within the guidelines, there's guidelines for people for the GM or the host to follow. And typically we say, look, don't let anybody start murdering each other for the first hour. Not that sometimes nobody gets murdered, but equally then, so we tend to go for two and a half hours of the actual role play itself. That will happen, and certain things you can introduce during the event to do things, and then the last half an hour, which is a really fun bit as well, is like where people will sit round, and then we'll go around the room, and either the detective will first start who he thinks did the murder and what his reasons were, which is not a bad thing, because then people open up, because they then open up and you go around the room and people say what they had to do and what they had to achieve, and it's hilarious because people go, well, my name's Anna, I'm this, and the people go, no, no, you're joking. And then they say about that, they review what they had to do, and then people go, oh, you're joking. You're having a laugh.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about talking to you. And then kind of people around, and everybody points to who they think the murder was. And typically we'll hand out like the best role player or the best fancy dress. If people get fancy dress as well, oh my God, such a difference when people actually then do fancy dress, because it releases their inhibitions a little bit more.
So people by fancy dress, I'm just going to translate that into North American. So that's basically dressing up into character, right?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it kind of varies, but typically the event out of the box will last 3 hours. But yeah.
And then so in this the box, is it like a manual that each player gets so they read their part? Or how do you separate that out so someone only gets their section but they can't see what everyone else is? Is it on a card, or how is that structured?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, they're going to get an invitation by mail. So so they'll have a digital version before they come to the event of the character, with the thing that I say, do not discuss your character with anybody else. And 99% of people don't, in fairness. So they'll get the characters pre in advance, and then when they get to the event, they'll also go in a very nice like 250 GSM card with their image on there, and they have his stuff on there. So we're thinking of adding things in there, like in a wallet, so that they can like add-ons. So the campaign will like be a wallet, so people can put their stuff in and get their props. So when they arrive at there, the host will be giving out the character sheets and also giving out their props as well. And also they get pen pictures of all the characters that are at the event with a brief how old they are, and for example, the one that we're launching is called Halloween, and it's a tour party that has ended up in Transylvania, bizarrely, but they're on a tour, a carriage tour, and it actually is set in history because we have a big very big travel agency called Thomas Cook, and the first tour was launched by Thomas Cook in 1892, which was the first kind of tour throughout Europe. So it's kind of loosely based on that. So they'll have a synopsis of where they, who they were, and are they a local dignitary, or where do they get picked up on the tour, and where they're heading to. So you have a pen pictures of all the characters at the event. But yeah.
And then is there, so the picture of the character, it's not a picture of the person, it's a picture of the character that's on their card and so forth
Yes.
for everyone else to see.
Yes.
Is there going to be any kind of like online ways people can customize it at all? Like, can they like swap out their own picture, for instance, and things like that? Or
No, we're going to be running some competitions. I mean, it's a good point, but no.
Hmm.
So we're going to be running some competitions at the campaign and pre-launch where people will get an entry into how to have their own face designed as one of the characters.
Hmm.
So it will be a generic box. There won't be any kind of changing around from that perspective. We've spent quite a lot of money on the artwork
Sure.
to
All looks
trying to
gorgeous.
get the
Yeah.
characters. But well, actually, it's really interesting because I went to I did some homework on art. I didn't want to use AI art. I wanted to use proper artists. I went on to Fiverr, and I budgeted a ridiculous amount of money for artwork for the box and stuff, but found an amazing artist on Fiverr that was actually very reasonable price, and the work that she's done is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So it's been a really interesting process to be on the other side of the fence
Yeah.
because I mentor and support people to be on your side of the fence. Even
Sure.
it's been really interesting. So so there's going to be competitions, and also one of the pledges is going to be that you could buy your way as per normal. You can one of the pledges will be to have your face and character. And we've done this. We created two extra characters after 24, and we took a picture of two people in fancy dress, friends of ours, and then we got the artist to do them in as the characters, and they were amazing. So, but yeah.
What do you do if, or how do you deal with, like in a 3 hour game? I'm just thinking, so say people can start murdering each other after the first hour, right? If you're one of the people that's murdered, what do you do for the next 2 hours? Is there something in there for them to
Do you know
continue to
what?
play a role, or how does that work?
Well, so you can, but typically we tell people be a ghost, and you can listen in on all the conversations that are happening, and it's really fun. I'm
Hmm.
genuinely fun. Actually listening into people and like going like, and then picking it, actually working out what was happening around is brilliant. It's just as much fun as actually being in there, listening in on people's conversations and putting things together, and also working with because then the host, like good host, I was hosting one a couple of months ago, and we had a couple of Obi people that decided because we were working at our board game cafe, we run it there. So a couple of staff were meeting around, and they were watching, and we said, "Well, why don't you, while you're here, pick the best role players and stuff?" And we were pointing out to them what was going on, and they were going, "No." Yeah, and they
Hmm.
were going, and they found it then fascinating to see how certain characters would develop and how the certain plots would evolve because there's two parts of this thing. It's called murder mystery. All right,
Hmm.
so there's a murder, but there's also mystery plots in there as well.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the murder plot. There's lots of plots going in there, lots of red herrings and stuff, as you would imagine on this sort of stuff as well that can happen. And no two games are the same because of the way it's structured. I've had a guy who's played the one that we tested 5 times now. He's played a different character every single time, and he's loved it every single time because each of the characters has their own objective, which might have nothing to do with the murder whatsoever. So,
Is this something where once it's been played, like, because I want to kind of dive into that a bit, because usually these type of games are kind of like a one and done, right? So if it's replayable, would you get to know what the different characters' hidden objectives are then, or is that kind of randomized, or
well,
how does that work?
so I spoke to somebody who was playing again, and for the second time he played the Halloween night when we first did a test through on in February, and then 6 months later we were playing it again last month, a couple of weeks ago, and I said, I said, do you remember who the murder was? He went, no. It was like, I just, you know what, I can't remember who the murder was. It's like, there
Mm,
we go then. And he had and he'd played the Count's butler, and then he played this time he played a detective, and he had a completely different experience. I mean, completely different experience whatsoever, and it didn't spoil it. And also within this one is that the way that the notes are structured, there could be multiple murderers. So you could
Mm.
choose, the host of the party will choose just before the event start which of those characters will be the actual murderer.
Interesting.
So yeah, so it's totally replayable. As I say, one of the guys is a guy called Keith, who's been friends with us, and he's played this like 5 times. And every time it's been a completely different, because the first 12 core characters and then the next six that come in, it creates a whole different dimension and different plot lines that'll create new plots, but also interweave then. And then the next six on top brings in a whole different culture, some of which can be connected, but equally will have fresh plots that we'll bring into it. So it's a totally different experience every single time you play
Is
it.
there a minimum player count and a maximum player count?
So 12 and then 24. We have played it with 30. We've
Yeah.
done a 30-player game. It is a mega game. So, but really for it to work, well, it's very interesting because we've tested it that the 12 core characters that are kind of in there. One of them dropped out last minute. He
Mm.
he couldn't make it down, and actually then we went, oh, what do we do? And actually we worked out that actually, okay, so we've now built into the guidelines for the host. So the host will have a complete guidelines of all the plots and who does what and who can and what you can do and so forth as well. So you can vary it around a little bit. And there's guidelines. There's not rules. The rules are very, very kind of simple, really. The players are the rules themselves. They govern actions and reactions happen with players' actions. But there's guidelines for the host to go in there. So if somebody's not sure, he'll just say time out and then and ask, for example, you can't just come up to the games master and say, right, I'm going to take this poison and I'm poisoning him. Really? So how are you doing that then? Well,
Yeah.
just poison him. Well, you can't just do that. Okay, so how are you going to do it? Right. Well, I'll go and buy a drink and I'll put the poison in the drink and I'll give him the drink. Okay, let me see you do that. So they have to go and do it.
Mm.
And then if the guy turns around and goes like, "Why have you just bought me a drink?" No, I'm not going to drink it. If he doesn't take that drink, and if he doesn't drink it, you have not poisoned him.
He's not
If you
poisoned.
want to,
That's
so yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
so you have to. It is steeped in realism that you have to. You can't just go. I've got a gun. I'm just going to shoot him. You're just going to shoot him in front of everybody. It's like, well, yeah, fine, okay. Well, you're going to try and do that, yeah? Yes, I'm going to try and do that. And like. So you have to be realistic, and as I say, we're going to be releasing some videos that make up the fun things that have happened and
Hmm.
the fun things that people have tried to do, and it's just hilarious, really, that we've done this, and we've got a whole raft of ones. The murder mystery starts off with a horror Halloween night. But there's so much more to come if this is successful. We've got fantasy, science fiction, Western, Roman. We've written loads of them. So
Oh, that's amazing. And how do you, or what would be your advice, I guess, to people who are maybe a little shy? And so, obviously, I think that whoever arranges this is probably going to be somebody that's more of an A-type personality that's going to say, hey, to all their friends, hey, let's do this murder mystery. It's going to be amazing. But of course, in that group, there's going to be some people that are going to be less outgoing or more shy than maybe others. How do you kind of bring those people into the fold, or how do you kind of ease them in so that they you can open up a bit and enjoy the experience and not almost be afraid of the experience, I guess would be the way to say it.
So a lovely story. My daughter, who's just turned 18, and she's off to university in a couple of weeks, and very much from when she hit her teens, became a very socially anxious person. And over the years, through various different techniques, mostly from owning a bloody expensive horse, she's developed, and never in a million years she likes role playing. She does things like Warcraft and board gaming, and she likes role playing, and never in a million years did I think that she would do the murder mystery, which was always something. And then we run a different one called The Sign-In. It's all about the record industry, the music industry, as another different test to get a different perception and stuff. And she said, "Oh, I'm going to do that." And I was like, what? Okay, this will be very, very, very interesting. And I mentioned she had to have a little cocktail to get her going, and just to relax. But she was head of a cult, and one of her objectives was to get married. So she ended up, right, the socially awkward butterfly ended up getting married to another head of another cult, so the cults merged together. And she had a whale of a time. And one of the feedbacks that we got from starting the event was an icebreaker. It was something we never had. And so one of the feedbacks, we've done market research questionnaires after each event about, did they find it difficult and that sort of stuff. So we've done our research, and one of the really good ideas which we've now implemented was part of the character description and your role is an icebreaker. And that icebreaker will indicate who you should maybe think about going to talk to first and the reason why. So we've got over that, and we tested that out, and it's worked an absolute treat. Once people literally get on with the first conversation and get over that first conversation, it becomes, but more importantly as well is that other people will have reasons to come and talk to you. So you will automatically, so people will go, I need to talk to you. Yeah, can I have a little chat? And then suddenly, before you know it, the 2.5 hours are over, and you go like, what just happened?
Yeah.
That was so much fun. And everybody, nobody, once you get out your comfort zone, the thing is, when it's now you go to networking or any sort of these sorts of things, is that you just need a reason to talk to people. You just need that initial reason to go and talk to people.
Sure.
And once you get going, 9 times out of 10, people do it. And we had another guy, the whole family came down, and the dad was not the only one not in fancy dress. He was obviously a little bit resident. So, but he ended up winning best role play for the night, and he was shocked. And the reason why he won best role play, there's a lot of extroverts in there, but one of his characteristics is that he's a bit loopy in the head, and he just blanks out. And there was a moment where he just staring into space, and his daughter was talking to him. She goes, Dad, are you all right, Dad? And I'm going, he's role playing,
Yeah.
he's role playing, And he was so subtle. He took his role, and he did it really subtly. And you don't have to be this extrovert to role play.
Sure.
You can be. There's enough in there for you to just do the subtle things. And we decided that we weren't going to give it to an extrovert. We were going to give it to a more introvert who subtly role plays his character brilliantly. So
it's amazing when you give people the shield of for lack of a better word, a mask, right? How they can open up. And I've seen this even with, if you go to a live like hypnosis show, right? And they'll pull people up on stage, and they'll get those people who are introverts and shy to do very extroverted things. And I don't necessarily believe they're hypnotized, but I think what is done is they're given permission to release the inhibitions, right? Because they've got the mask of the show that they can kind of hide behind. And this is maybe something similar. You've decided to do this on GameFound versus Kickstarter. Can you talk quickly about that decision? Why GameFound, and then how people would find it when you guys are ready to launch?
Absolutely. So, really interesting journey. Really, really, really interested. There's a couple of major reasons why I went to it, and I don't know. I'll just caveat that I don't know whether I've made the right decision, but I had to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I find and mentor people when they launch is that you need to take the crowd to crowdfunding, and you kind of launch that way. And I think the Kickstarter make that harder to do than what GameFound do. I mean, look at their launch pages. It's a paragraph with notify me with one image. Well, I mean, unless you then go to that person's website or try to kind of get more information, you're not really there and then looking to hit that launch button, unless you're driven there by external marketing. And so one of the major reasons that we found with GameFound is that their pre-launch page is 100 times better, and also they can run you can run a pre-sales event where basically if you follow the campaign and then back it, you will get this gift. So the gift is there. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to be giving away an art print if they follow it and then back it, they'll get this art print for free. But more importantly, they will also get an entry into a competition that will get their face, so there'll be two places, one male, one female, to get their face in as one of the characters to the to in the actual game itself. And we think that, or we hope that this will generate a lot more followers than we would through our own marketing, on Kickstarter, which is the big thing, really, for us as a first time publisher. Despite all my knowledge and everything that I tell people or practice to preach, we know it's difficult and it's not easy. So we think with that mechanism that we will end up with, and I've seen it. I see a lot more followers on GameFound than organically, and less organically than with Kickstarter. So the downside of that, though, is that GameFound has something like 2 million potential customers, whereas Kickstarter has 7 million. And obviously Kickstarter is more established on that role playing front as well. But even so, I still need to generate my own crowd to crowdfund. So we take that big the risk. The second reason being that even though I'm pretty much on the tax expert in terms of being able to help support people with their VAT, particularly American publishers and my VAT agency, etc. as well. It's still a lot bloody easier if you're with GameFound and they act as an online marketplace, which means that they, for the EU, they collect and they sort the VAT outside of things as well. So those, but the pre-launch marketing and the ability to run this competition, this add-on with this competition, I think. Or the strategy will be that will get us a significant amount of followers to make sure that this first one is going to be successful. And GameFound, in fairness, have been very honest and gone like, to be honest with you, whether you pick one or the other, I think you'll be successful. There's not. They'd be very honest to say, with your product and your demographic, I don't think we're exceptionally much stronger, but we're probably on a par with Kickstarter. And the benefits are, so they've been really, really good. So that's ultimately why we chose GameFound. And it might be the wrong decision, but it's still a decision. So,
well, I'm assuming this is going to go very well for you guys.
Thank you.
When it does go well, how quickly can you turn around the next iteration? Because I imagine with a game like this, that once people are kind of hooked or addicted, it's kind of like escape rooms, right? Once you do one, you want to go rush out and do 6 more. And is there going to be like a year between editions? Are you guys able to bring the next edition out quickly, the next theme? Or is it going to be exclusively done through the crowdfunding platform, each individual edition that you do?
Yeah, a good question. We have the good thing about this is that once this template is sorted up, we literally have probably about 10 to 15 scenarios written. Our market research says that people want a fantasy one and then a science fiction one, which we already have those kind of lined up, really. So the good thing about this is all our artwork is pretty much done. We've got to do typesetting and that sort of stuff and layout, so we can pretty much deliver the next iteration, or that we could deliver this one pretty quickly, which means that we could probably then start working on the next one relatively quickly, and if we've got that template, then it should be fairly easy to follow. So certainly we'll be in a position to launch the next one in 6 to 12 months afterwards. So
that's very exciting. Well, Nigel, I want to wish you guys all the best with this campaign. I am so excited for you. For people that want to check this out prior to GameFound launch, go to Mystery and Adventure Games. Is it .co or is it .com? I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes, so it's easy for people to click on and find. Check out the website. The artwork looks amazing on the website. I think people will be impressed just seeing that alone. And then what we'll do also, once you launch on GameFound, I'll put in the Facebook Board Game Binge Facebook group for those who are in that group, and if you're not, please join. We'll put a link in there for people to easily find the GameFound page. And Man, I got my fingers crossed for you, man. This looks really exciting.
Thank you. I mean, you know what? And I've got to say, the journey has been interesting. To rebond with friends I haven't seen for 15 years,
Sure.
and actually to be on the other side of the fence, and to go through that one, and to go through this step by step. It's been a fascinating process, and succeed or not, it's definitely been worth the journey. It's been really interesting. So,
well, it's half the battle. All right, my friend,
Thank
and
you.
hopefully we'll see you at Essen.
Yeah, definitely, James. We should be having some beet beer, some Weiss beer.
Absolutely. All right, we'll see you there. Take care.
Good stuff.
Cheers.
Take care, buddy. Bye-bye, James.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.